But he surrounded himself with women. He brought women from other countries. Undoubtedly, any time that he saw a woman of beauty, he just brought her. And then last, number 7, I turn my thought to consider wisdom. And you'll find this in verse 12 of chapter 2. I turn my thought to consider wisdom. This is educational attainments. We live in a very educated world, and it is absolutely necessary that our children attain as high a level of education as possible, because we live in a very competitive world and they can be left behind. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you see, there are those who can become entrapped in the goals of education and more degrees, and somehow they get so confused in attaining all of these degrees that becomes their purpose for living and their purpose of life, and they never seem to reach the place where they feel like they have enough education, enough degrees. They have BAs and MAs and ABCs and XYZs, and they continue. Those were the 7 areas where he had searched. And it's obvious as you read the entire book, at least as you read it, he came up empty-handed in all of these areas where his own heart led him. He was being directed by his own heart, not by God, not by the God that he knew so well in the beginning of his kingship. He was being directed by his own heart, his own feelings, his own desires. And he tried all of these areas, and he simply came up empty, with the search needing to go on. I want you to notice in verse 11, when in honesty he says, yet, he has done all of this searching, yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless. A chasing after the wind, nothing was gained under the sun. At least he's honest with himself and with whoever may have read his writings. I came up empty. And this list of 7 probably could have been longer, and maybe it's longer for some of us. We try these things. But I wonder how honest we are, as Solomon is honest here in all of this searching. He says, I have come up with nothing. I've tried it all. Everything that the world has to offer me, everything my heart's desire wanted, I have tried it. Yet, when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless. Chasing after the wind. So where do we go from here? Where do we continue our search? Maybe we've tried all of these things. Maybe we probably have our own list of what we have tried and left behind. And here we are today, at this point in our life, just as empty as we ever were, just as dissatisfied with a life so meaningless. I have put into your Sunday Word the quote of St. Augustine. Is a well-known quote, and you would have known it even before I put it here. But I pulled it up as St. Augustine said to us, thou hast, and this is speaking of God, thou hast made us for thyself, and our souls are restless until they find rest in thee. Our souls are made for you, and I were made for God. We were made for God to indwell within us, bringing us the meaningfulness, the satisfaction, the peace that every life must have, that every one of us must have. We search for it, unconsciously maybe, but we are searching for it, and it is only found when we turn to God, because we were created by Him, created in His image and in His likeness. We were created to be full of Him. In conclusion, only God, through His Son Jesus Christ, can bring into our lives the kind of meaningfulness that gives peace, rest, purpose, and genuine hope. In Matthew 28, Matthew 11:28, this verse that we so well know, when Jesus was referring to this much needed inner rest and peace, and He said, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and burdened, I will give you rest." It is obvious that Solomon was weary in his search that had brought him to the place of declaring, meaningless, meaningless, utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. Let me tell you a story. Earlier in the service, we sang Victory in Jesus, and it talked about the blood of Christ and what the blood of Christ can do for us. The blood that was shed at Calvary and what it will do for us. I take this story from one of my favorite online preachers, Ravi Zacharias. And many of you, I know, listen to him. I go to him daily. In November of 2008, Joe, you may remember, going back to November 2008, in the city of Bombay. I still want to say Bombay and Mumbai, and we keep changing the name. November of 2008, in that vast city of 16 million, terrorist attacks paralyzed the city. There were terrorist teams that came from another country and attacked 12 different locations in the city. Their goal, it was stated, and of the terrorists, all were killed in the attacks except one. He has since been hung by the Indian government, but the one lived, and he lived to tell the story. He said, our goal was to kill 5,000 people in the city. And because the attacks were widespread, the city, that huge city, simply came to a halt and was paralyzed with fear.